Hola amigos, coming up in this episode...
¿Qué? Doblado.
Doblado, no hermanos míos.
I feel like I've walked onto the set of Conan the Barbarian.
¿Qué es adentro?
Vamos a investigar.
Now that's strange because the pre-Hispanic people here in South America supposedly didn't know about magnetism. This photo gives you some perspective of just how tall these funerary towers are. But soon these two groups began to fight each other. He raised capital and along with his brother drained the lake, and they soon became fantastically rich. And here's something I didn't expect to see. Men dancing with armadillos. So I'm in the Peruvian town of Puno on the shores of Lake Titicaca, planning to ride to Arequipa. It's only my second day on this trip. This is the view from our hotel, which was actually called the Hotel Arequipa. It looked overcast and rainy, and at an altitude of over 3,800 metres, it was cold. I don't like the cold, and my bike at Wacky didn't like the cold either. Angelo's bike started up no problems. Mine did as well, and gave it a choke and a high revs and warming it up, but it just wouldn't idle. Ah, good. Oh, come on, that Wacky. This is where a Honda beats the Chinese. We warmed them up for the same amount of time, and yet he's off there and I'm conking out here due to the cold. Eventually she got going. Finally we were on our way to Arequipa, we thought. There's another one of those pillboxes. I think they're actually police observation posts, so they can catch people like me going through a red light, because I was paying more attention to Angelo than the traffic lights. This might look like a pretty ordinary little town, but a few hundred years ago it was one of the richest communities in the world. I'll tell you why in a minute. More potholes, probably caused by the heavy rain. Okay, you've heard of El Dorado, the golden one. Well, this place here could be called Silverado. I'll tell you why. In 1657, more than 100 years after the Spanish conquered the Incas, a Spaniard called Jose Salcedo married a local woman called Malika, who herself was a descendant of Cusicoyo, a daughter of Pachacutec, the builder of Machu Picchu. It's kind of like a James Michener novel. These same names keep popping up throughout Peruvian history. After she married him, she revealed to him the location of a fantastically rich deposit of silver ore. Now, these silver deposits had been worked by the Incas and probably long before the Incas. And the tunnels, or socavones as they call them in Spanish, led under a lake. And the lake had the name of Laykakota. Now, kota means lake in Spanish, but Layka means cursed, damned, diabolical. So, Lake of the Damned would be quite a good translation, especially when you consider what happened within just a few years of the Spanish taking control and exploiting these mines. He raised capital and along with his brother drained the lake, and they soon became fantastically rich. The settlements grew so quickly, in a few years he had 2,000 stone houses in a fortified complex, 4 churches and a hospital. The Salcedo brothers were from Andalusia in the south of Spain, but they also accepted workers from the Basques in the north of Spain. But soon these two groups began to fight each other. They put the infighting on hold for a while the mining camp was under siege from a native rebellion that came out of La Paz, but afterwards they started fighting again, and eventually the Andalusians won the day, but all these Spanish killing each other got the attention of the Spanish governor, who made a trip out to see him. And Jose Salcedo must have got wind that he was in hot water, because he lined the streets for several blocks with bars of silver, arches decorated with silver flowers, everything made of pure silver in an effort to impress him. Silver was so plentiful they even made silver bullets for their guns. But the Spanish governor arrested Jose Salcedo and charged him with treason, despite him offering a fantastic ransom to stay alive, had him executed, beheaded, His head was displayed on a pike for all to see, along with 100 other people. Several thousand fled the area, and the mines were closed, the buildings were destroyed, and the land was salted. Malika, the widow and the descendant of Pachacutec, as an act of spite or revenge or whatever, flooded these mines. Now, the actual mine shaft entrances can still be seen just in these hills overlooking the town, and some mining is going on in the area, but many Peruvians are still superstitious and won't go near them or work in them. They think they're bewitched or cursed by these events of the past. Whereas the mining town and processing works of San Luis de Alba are only 6 kilometres southeast of here, less than 4 miles, and they can still be seen on Google Earth because they were built like a fortress. It was like Fort Knox in more ways than one, with 4-metre walls made of stone. The mine shafts or socavons would actually be up there somewhere in those hills up there. Now we're heading up this winding road that I remember coming down yesterday. Now this is a bit of a test because I've never overtaken a truck before, and we're going uphill. We're probably 4,000 metres and I'm fully loaded. I'll have to be very cautious about this, but let's give it a go. Yoo-hoo, no worries. At least I'm not the slowest vehicle on the road. But straight after easily overtaking that truck, a feeling of foreboding seems to be taken over. I'm trying to catch up with Angelo again, but something seems a bit wrong. I don't know, I can't put my finger on it. Something feels funny. Aha, here's Angelo waiting for me. He wants me to stop. He's pointing at my back tyre, he's saying it's flat. Pinchazo, that's like a flat. Oh no. Now I know what that strange feeling was. It was the wobbling of the tyre. It just wasn't gripping the road properly because it was half deflated. It wasn't completely flat, but it was pretty flat. Well, that's a record. Second day and I've got a puncture. You've heard of beginner's luck? Well, how about beginner's bad luck? Got to unpack the bike, and my bike doesn't have a centre stand, so we have to find rocks to prop it up. Well, at least I'm with Angelo who can help me. Looks like we broke down in almost the same spot as yesterday. Well, Angelo had it off in a jiffy. Now he's got to get the tube out.
Mucho has caminado con la llanta baja, Glenn.
¿Qué? Doblado.
Doblado, no armaron bien.
Es demasiado grande, ¿no?
Sí.
No.
Although we had a puncture repair kit and everything and a hand pump, Angelo said it was quicker and we'll get a better job if he just takes it down to a tyre repair place, which he did. So I just had to wait. It could have been worse, but it was pretty miserable. It started to rain. Then the rain left a bit, so I took another little panorama and I noticed this blue motorbike trike just over there, so I went to have a look, and guess what? It was a Ronco too, the same brand as my bike. It kind of looked like nobody owned it, like it was half abandoned, it wasn't locked up or anything. Is this where all Roncos come to die? On the edge of the Lake Titicaca? Oh dear. Angelo was back in about an hour.
¿Todo listo?
And pretty soon we were back on the road. But he said with the time we lost, we were cutting it fine and the weather and everything, to make it to Arequipa unless we want to ride in the dark, which is not a good idea. And I said, well, what else can we do? And he pointed up to that giant puma on the hill. It's a place called Puma Uta, which means home of the puma. I said, yeah, let's go up there and have a look. At least the sun had come out, so that would made it a much more pleasant day. So we continued our winding climb upwards. But at a certain point we turned left and turned into these back suburbs up overlooking Lake Titicaca and the top of Puno. Finally arriving at the actual Puma Uta Mirador, or home of the Puma lookout. Oh man, look at that! Because my bike was fully packed, I didn't want to wander too far away from the bike, so we just had a quick look around. I feel like I've walked onto the set of Conan the Barbarian. Look at that giant snake head there. That looks like a lookout tower, and it has a great view of all of Puno and Lake Titicaca. In fact, from here you can see snowy peaks far beyond the far side of Lake Titicaca, like Nevado Anconjuma and Nevado Chachacamani, both over 6,000 metres, and the latter is almost 180 kilometres distant on the eastern side of the Andean Cordillera. Up there they had these trash cans that said Puno, Bahia de los Incas, which means Puno, the Bay of the Incas. And I started wondering, why does it say that? Well, there were flotillas of reed boats on this lake in Inca times. And the geography of this place lends itself to be a protected bay because the winds predominantly come from the north and the east, and they can produce waves that can reach up to 2 metres in the windy season. In fact, the infamous Che Guevara, in one of his lesser-known escapades, was caught in a terrible storm on this lake in 1953, and they had to row for their lives till their hands bled, due to wave conditions they said was like being on the ocean.
I just spent 6 hours in a leaky boat.
That probably explains why the famous floating Uros Reed Islands are situated just a few kilometres east of here. They are also protected from these northerly and easterly winds and waves. Now, while the Incas were sailing around here maybe a few hundred years before the Spanish came, thousands of years ago, 4,000 years ago to be exact, the people who lived in this area were making gold necklaces, a remarkable example of which was unearthed here in the early 2000s. And it's the oldest example of gold jewellery found anywhere in the Americas, North, South, Central America. It was found in a field about 4,100 metres in altitude, which is quite high, in a place called Romuco, and it's only about 30-something miles southeast of here. I could have spent all day here shooting a Gigapan, but there was another site near here worth checking out called Sillustani, so we headed there. It was about a 30-kilometre ride to Sillustani. This little town is called Hatuncolla, or Upper Colla, after the Colla people who were conquered by the Incas. About 90% of the people here speak Quechua, and only about 10% actually speak Spanish. Looks like they've run out of gas or something. So this is how the common folk get around. It's amazing how the campesina's hat doesn't blow off in the wind. I imagine sheep at this altitude would produce a lot of wool because it's so cold. Now there's water either side, it's kind of like a causeway. So we're coming to a separate lake to Titicaca called Lago Umayo. I wasn't too happy about leaving my fully packed bike here in a car park, but everybody assured me it was very secure, so we did. And then we walked uphill to the chullpas de Sillustani. Look over there, there's a football field and there's a church, street lighting. That sign says, Tomb of the Elite Incas and the Collas, site of a religious cult of the dead. They might be repositories of the dead, but let's look at some living things. I don't even know what these little fellas are called, but they're full of life, out enjoying the sun, which seems to be coming and going a lot today.
¿Qué es?
Un hueco.
¿Muy profundo?
Sí, muy profundo.
¿Qué encontraste?
Es muy raro, no sé, parece una araña.
¿Es vivo? No.
Muerto.
¿Muerto?
Angelo pulled this guy out of the water here.
¿Qué es?
I have no idea what it is. Some sort of water insect. It must be pretty tough to survive at almost 4,000 metres of altitude. Nice yellow flowers there in what's basically a burial field for the pre-Hispanic people. This photo gives you some perspective of just how tall these funerary towers are. And because it's broken away there, a bisection of how it was constructed from different types of stone. Archaeologists have identified around 100 different structures on this site. Some people will see phallic symbolism in the shape of these towers, And one prominent archaeologist thinks the very name Umayo derives from the indigenous term for head of the phallus. Curiously, seen from a satellite or a drone, the peninsula and the headland here does have a vague resemblance to such a shape. And if these Sillustani chullpas are indeed phallic, then they would complement adobe chullpas found in other parts of the Altiplano that have Ionic-shaped apertures that face the east. This one here is called the lizard chullpa. And Angelo just had to go inside.
¿Qué hay adentro?
Vamos a investigar.
¿Qué he visto? ¿Algo?
Es puras piedras.
¿Qué tamaño?
Ah, como 3 metros de alto. Solo son piedras.
Paul Marcoy, a French explorer travelling in the 1800s, often sought shelter in these sepulchres during snowstorms. But what he found inside would make your hair stand on end. Mummy bundles, basically cadavers wrapped up in cloth with their faces exposed, often to a window that looked out to the east to get the rising sun. These structures are best described as cyclopean. They're just huge. You can see the inner shell has been made of pebbles set in a clay dome, and the outer shell is made of closely fitting stone blocks, reminiscent of the Incas, and the Incas did the later ones here, but also different in a way. It does feel mysterious here. Check out that flat-topped island over there. It's so flat it looks kind of man-made. I was impressed enough to want to set up for a panorama or two. There is something eerie, barren, something desolate about this windswept, high-altitude, treeless peninsula. Then I saw this. Note how it's carved in a ring shape on the right-hand side there, directly into the bedrock. Hiram Bingham found a pair of these set into the floor at Machu Picchu and initially thought they were mortars for grinding corn. It is now thought they were filled with water and became water mirrors or astronomical mirrors for gazing at the stars. Such mirrors were only briefly mentioned in one chronicle, the chronicle of Antonio de la Calancha, who gave them the name Coyo Sayana, which translates as the place where the star stops, is detained or waits. There are also several Intihuatanas here, which usually translates as place where the sun gets tired or hitching post of the sun. So you can see there's a similarity there. Some appeared semicircular, but maybe some stones have been removed. There were some really big ones down low, and up on the summit there were some smaller ones. But what did they do? Again, if we go back through the old chronicles, or even the journals of the early explorers, we get some interesting clues. There was a pioneering American archaeologist called Squier visited here, and he called them sun circles. He noted that the upright stones slotted into horizontal, specially carved base stones. He thought it was some sort of calendrical sundial because there were also like two pillars in the middle that aligned with sunrises and sunsets. But a more recent interpretation by the eminent archaeologist Kaufmann Doig thinks that they are merely the circular foundations of an unfinished chullpa. That probably is the case for the smaller ones up on the hill, but these large ones, well, it must have been a huge chullpa that was going to be built that was never finished. Another archaeoastronomy researcher, Edwin Salazar, surveying the site found that the chullpas themselves are not placed randomly, but they align with solstices, equinoxes, solar zeniths, solar nadirs, which makes it even more interesting because they were built at different times, these chullpas, and in different styles. Edwin Salazar also reported that the chullpas themselves are very magnetic and pull compass needles towards them, while the batteries of their camera gear mysteriously just went dead. It appears that work here stopped suddenly because there you can see a chullpa that's not finished yet. It doesn't have a top on it, but there's a ramp made of loose stones leading up to it, so that's how they got the heavy rocks up to that height. They didn't have scaffolding, but they built these ramps. The arrival of the Spanish probably stopped construction here. Again, Juan Poma's book gives a very good clue of how they did this, and it was basically a lot of manpower and a lot of hard work and elbow grease. You can see there the foreman standing on the rock and a work team dragging it along. You see how some of them are like split open. I overheard a tour guide say there were two theories. One, that they were just broken open by huaqueros or looters, treasure hunters, and sometimes they used dynamite. The other one is that they were struck by lightning. That's why they have these lightning rods here, to protect them from further lightning strikes and damage. But ironically, while lightning may have played a role in their destruction, it also played a role in their construction. Squier was very observant and he spent a while here, and he recounts how parts of the cliffs are constantly falling down through erosion, but chiefly through the effect of lightning strokes, for hardly a thunderstorm passes by without sending one or more bolts at the ridge on its rocky ledge. He saw lightning strike the water around here 27 times in half an hour, and yet the lightning never struck the towers themselves. Lightning striking rocks nearby and breaking them up led him to conclude the andesite stones used in the construction here in Sillustani was chiefly quarried by lightning. He observed that some large blocks were abandoned halfway between the quarry and this site here, still had stone props under them, and they had little knobs on them so they could be levered and ropes attached to them and hauled, just as Waman Poma's illustration shows. Now, he was writing before electric hand tools were invented, and he concluded that these stones were just rough cut, hauled, finished completely by hand, with the most laborious part, which is cutting the big blocks out of the quarry, made easier because it was done by lightning. However they made them, they left something monumental here, and it's very, very impressive. On the way back, we saw this boulder, which was very roughly in the shape of a puma's head, but you see that spiral there in one face. If you pass a compass near it, it deflects the needle, but only where the spiral is, as if it marks a magnetic anomaly. Now that's strange, because the pre-Hispanic people here in South America supposedly didn't know about magnetism. But we know that when lightning strikes rocks, it can leave them magnetized. In fact, recent studies have shown that in Central America, people made little statuettes from stones magnetized after being struck by lightning. And I guess they were charms or assigned magical or religious or spiritual powers because it amazed people. Even more intriguing, a bar-shaped piece of natural iron made by the Olmecs of Mexico may have been one of the first crude compasses ever made in the world and predate the Chinese ones by up to 1,000 years. But why would they carve a spiral into that rock right there where it's magnetic? Well, in California, there are petroglyphs that mark out magnetic anomalies, and it's theorized that the ancient people went there with a piece of lodestone on a string, and when it deflected, they were amazed and thought it was something magical, so they marked it out. We can only guess maybe the pre-Hispanic people did the same here. Now, this lake must be higher than normal due to the rainy season, as you can see by that wall disappearing into the depths there. This lake is about 100 feet or 30-something meters higher in altitude than Lake Titicaca, and there's some boats, so you can disregard that claim that Lake Titicaca is the highest navigable lake in the world. On the way back, we saw these llamas grazing outside a traditional stone hut. Looks like they've got their own lightning rod, not taking any chances with lightning around here. I read somewhere that it does kill a lot of people working out in the fields. You see those ceramic bulls? They're called Toritos de Pucará, and they're like a fertility, good luck charm that people put on their houses in rural areas here in the Andes. This is at the town of Hatuncolla, and that church, the Church of San Andres, it's run down, but it has a charm of its own. Look at the watermark around the base of that bell tower. Look at the pigeons and grass growing on the roof there. So we're back in Puno. We went out for dinner. This guy's actually selling blue pens and a blue ultraviolet light for detecting fake money. I think she's selling aerosol cans of that party foam spray that they use with gay abandon in some of these street carnivals. Puno's annual carnival was far from over yet, and unfortunately it went on long into the night, right outside our hotel window. But, you know, it's something different, and I said it in the last episode, but I'll say it again. It's very interesting, it's quaint, it's good to see people enjoying themselves, and I just wonder how much practice and dedication and sacrifice people go into joining these groups and, you know, practicing and getting their uniforms and getting in tune and everything. It's quaint, it's nice, but it's not for me to judge or anything, but I like it. And here's something I didn't expect to see. Men dancing with armadillos. I guess the armadillos are dead, I can't really tell, but look at that, they're handling them like they're a prop in the dance. People from Puno are called Puneños, and these Puneños, you can tell they're just in it for their own fun and enjoyment, not putting on airs and graces, because look at many of those people dancing are just wearing ordinary clothes. They look like they joined in just off the street as it went past their house or something. It struck me that that's something that my culture in Australia lacks. I never saw anything like that in Australia. Not when I was growing up, anyway, not in the little country towns where I grew up in rural Australia. Anyhow, that brings to an end day 2 of my motorbike trip. Coming up in the next episode. That's almost 15,000 feet.
It was foolish. We should have turned around and gone back, and it was probably the most dangerous thing I did in 8 years of riding.
I don't know what was more astounding, Angelo's antics on the pike or those weird rock formations behind him. Che doesn't feel like talking tonight.
Gringo Loco asks,
Hit the subscribe button.
please subscribe.